Brian described was a horrific scene of blood all over the hallways and stuff, and the dorms, people being stuck in dorms so they can come out, at least can investigate, that kind of stuff. The reason that this particular incident really made it important for us to come out here was because we have been hearing about a lot of tension in the shelters, and had heard about other incidents, and particularly at Maxwell Megan over the last 2 or 3 weeks, where there have been 3 or 4 serious incidents where some of the people have been hospitalized as a result of violence. In some cases where knives were used. Also the same man, Brian McGarty, talked about an incident about 2 months ago where there was actually a brawl in Maxwell Megan over a TV and what to watch and that kind of stuff. The windows were broken and there were fights and that kind of stuff. And lastly, as we were talking about what was happening here and coming for a press conference, as everyone know, another man in our neighborhood, in our community, died, a homeless man on Parliament. That they found dead, that had been there for a long time, over a few weeks, and we don't know all the details, we don't know who he is, we're trying to find out, we don't know the situation, although we can anticipate. So the reason that we want to be out here today is to talk about why this is happening, in terms of why we understand this happening. And in order to understand this, is you have to understand that the city, in our opinion, has been systematically getting rid of services in this neighborhood. So for instance, in 2006, over 300 beds were shut down. 5 major hospitals, many of them in this neighborhood, were shut down. The city right now is in the process of shutting down the schoolhouse, which had 55 beds. What that does, it creates extreme tension on the existing shelters. Extreme tension. And which means that the overcrowding will often lead to violence. Sometimes it's minor. What we're seeing right now is some of this is much more serious. And we want the city to immediately begin to announce that they're not going to shut down the schoolhouse, that they be kept open to deal with the overcrowding in the shelters and the tensions that exist there. Secondly, that we need more services, we need more shelters to make sure that people are not warehoused in these places. You have to understand what's been happening since 1995 when the welfare cuts happened in the housing, they stopped building housing. We don't have housing for people here. That's why these places are full. Although the city has a housing first policy, and that's the reason they're saying they're shutting down the schoolhouse, there is no housing. And the truth, if they have housing, you know what, then let's walk in there right now, let's set up a table, and let's house these people. You know what, you'll have a line 300 or 400 deep if you have housing to offer to people right now. The truth is, if you go to any housing worker, they're telling people 3 to 4 years, 3 to 7 years for housing. So that's the problems that we're having. We have a number of speakers going to speak, and at the end I'll just wind down. So I'll start with Monica from Health Providers Against Poverty. So I'll get Monica to speak.
Can you start with your full name and title, Monica?
Sure, my name is Monica and I'm D like David T. So as a family physician and a member of Health Providers Against Poverty, I'm denouncing the increasing levels of violence in overcrowded shelters that has been reported and witnessed in the last month in downtown Toronto. Assaults, stabbings, and severe injuries have occurred in downtown shelters, and such are the conditions individuals have to face to fear when seeking refuge in the shelter system. People seek refuge in shelters when they're out of work, when they can't find work, or they have lost their work, been laid off, can't afford their rent, and because social assistance are woefully inadequate and well below the poverty line. Individuals and families simply cannot afford to pay Toronto rental prices. In Toronto, the biggest and richest city in the country, individuals have to risk their health and safety when entering the shelter system. This is totally unacceptable and must be addressed immediately. Toronto faces a very serious housing crisis when it comes to safe, supportive, and affordable housing. There's a total lack of political will to provide decent, human, affordable housing. Shelter space is being closed. The downtown core is gradually being rid of services and housing for people living in poverty. The province as a whole has repeatedly failed to address living wages, a living income to meet basic needs such as shelter and food. There's a clear correlation with the very violent incidents that have occurred recently and the overcrowding that occurs in downtown shelters. And to note, Canada is one of the few industrial countries that fails to have a national housing strategy. HPAP, along with the other organizations here, is alarmed at the conditions and the unwillingness of all levels of government to begin to properly address issues of poverty, specifically overcrowding and unsafe living conditions. This is yet another example of the shameful trend that Toronto, Ontario, and Canada as a whole is setting when it comes to dealing with the most vulnerable members of society. We demand action to address the overcrowding and inadequate shelter conditions, and we urge all levels of government to adequately address affordable housing. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. Our next speaker is Jessica, a nurse from Street Health.
Jessica, and same deal, full name, spell it.
I'm a registered nurse in the community. I'm also a member of HPAP, and my last name is Hales, Hales. So the recent increase in preventable deaths and injuries to victims of poverty and violence in this community is only part of the horrific scene witnessed by healthcare providers like myself over the past few years. The erosion of income housing and shelter supports in Canada in the downtown Toronto core has led to community members being forced to turn to unsafe shelters or the streets for refuge in times of crisis. The tremendous stress and inhumane conditions and overcrowding endured by this population leads to poor health and an increased risk of violence, and is directly related to the slashing of public programs in favor of ensuring income increases for the wealthy few. We are at a time when the income gap is of record proportions, and that continues to grow while the basic human rights of the many are denied. Shelter and housing space is now being destroyed to build fancy condos and shops displacing many community members literally to the margins of society. We demand that all levels of government immediately ensure the basic human need for income, safe, affordable, and in some cases supportive housing is met. Unfortunately, due to the looming recession and low wages, we also demand an increase in safe emergency shelters so those in crisis have a safe place to go for refuge.
Thanks, Jeff. And people will be around if you have any questions. So I'm just going to wind down, but I want to say just a few things before I wind down. The first thing I want to say is around what happened, I guess, at 2 o'clock in the morning, the other night, in what Brian described. Here you have a man, and we don't know him, who comes in and needs a bed, lays down in a dorm that might have 20 to 30 men, and somehow, at 2 in the morning, his whole life is turned upside down in ways that he probably never would have imagined. And not only that, it is witnessed by other men who know that they could have been in that bed, or that competition could have been with them. Everyone understands this in the shelter, how tense things can be. And we cannot allow this condition to continue to exist. It has existed for decades. We know what goes on because people talk to us. We've called for lots and lots of stuff. But today we say this has to stop, and hospital services has to be held accountable. The city has to make sure that these places are safe. The first thing they can do to begin to alleviate some of the tensions and the overcrowding is to make sure that this building next door over here, the schoolhouse, is kept open. A decision will be made on June 26th at the city around this issue. We've approached the local councillor here, Kristen Duong Tang, on several occasions. She refuses to speak and say that she will keep that shelter open, and I don't understand this. These shelters, these services are essential for people who live in this community. This community, this neighborhood has a long history that goes back almost 2 centuries of welcoming poor people, people who lived in hostels, people looking for work, people who are living in social. We have a long history of that, and we have a right to these services, and we want to keep these services here. So that's the first thing the city can do, is do that. Secondly, in order to address this, we need more services. The schoolhouse can't deal with all of this, so we need more shelters to open. So we need the city to look at this, to get rid of the overcrowding that exists. So you can't have a situation like I saw about a week ago, where a homeless man goes to the Gateway, which is at Jarvis, at 10:30 in the morning, and he's told his name is being put on the list, and he doesn't know until 11 o'clock whether he has a bed or not that night. And that's the norm if you go to the Salvation Army sometimes. There's no beds, you have to put your name on the list. What does that mean, to walk around all day not knowing where you're going to sleep? Do you take the chance? What does that mean? What does that mean? So we have to stop that. So we have to make sure that when people go to a hostel, they get a bed.
What about condos?
Condos.
Everything's going
No.
condo on George Street.
So we need that to happen. But also, most importantly, we need the city to speak out and to say what a city council said over 10 years ago, that we need social housing, that the welfare rates is too low. We were around in 1996 or 1995 when Harris cut the welfare rates, and that city took a stand and said the welfare rates were too low, some of them. even the mayor, and they called for housing. And we need that to happen, because if we don't have that, we'll never resolve these issues. And this council has to be honest about that. You can't tell us that you're not able to house these people. Be honest about that. And if you are, Kristen, I'll come with you. We'll come. Ontario Coalition Against Poverty will come right here. We'll set up a table with the councillor. If you say there's housing, you have the housing. Let's go. That's my challenge. You know, so you can call her, tell her tomorrow morning. If she sets the time, come with the table, with the units. We'll line people up. Within 2 weeks, we'll empty this place out. But everyone here knows. Everyone who lives here knows this is a lie. They can't find housing.
That's right.
You can't do that. Everyone knows that.
They don't want to find housing. They want to keep
So let's be honest. But really, lastly, what I want to say is that we are really concerned about the fact that men are going into shelters where they should be protected, and they come out in an ambulance and are hospitalized. And then not only that, we do have a gentleman right now that we're trying to find out about that. How did he wind up under those stairs? Why was he there? Why are people choosing going there? What was happening in his life? Why was it a situation? What happened to those men, those 20, 30 men who saw that beating? Where do you go after that? Do you come back to your bed knowing what happened? Who takes that man's bed? Those 2 beds are gone because who takes that bed? There's a history there that those men can talk about. And you know what? Every single man here could talk about other incidents that they've seen in terms of the tension. Sometimes how bad it can get. So let's talk about that. Let's be honest about that. Let's not give us this crap about homes first or housing first, that we're dealing with those people. We know that's not happening. We know that people are not taken care of. So let's be honest about that. So on June 26th, one of the main things we want to do is to ensure that the city begins to address this. And one of the ways they can concretely do this is open the schoolhouse. And maybe people should go to Kristen right now and ask her, what about this man that died? Actually, it was in Pam O'Connor's writing, I think, that she was a councillor for Parliament. Ask those councillors, what about this? What is this about? What is it? How did he fall through the cracks? This wonderful streets of homes. What happened? What happened? Well, so we have to ask those questions, those serious questions. So I'll end there. If people have questions, there are other people here. We'll answer them.
You talked about